mince words, as I tend to do on this show. And some of it's stuff I already do, and some of it's stuff that's like, oh, it's kind of neat. And I already I wrote a little rant about why I didn't like this movie. Uh, but I don't know if I'm going to say the whole thing. I'm going to look through it real quick and see if we get there. So, like, I vaguely remember watching this in my early teen years, and I had like a positive view on it. I know people who like love this movie. There's so
Yeah.
many people who like vehemently think that this movie is the best thing, and it's okay, but I'm not one of those people, and that's fine. And it just, yeah, it just hit really different in watching it this adult version. And also, like, I feel like if I watched it again, maybe I wouldn't as vehemently hate it. I think it's just more so I really just didn't like the characters, and I have a hard time enjoying media when I dislike the
Mhm.
characters. But it did do really cool things with its shots, and there's a lot. The
Yeah.
way they explored the brain was really neat,
It's
and
very
it was
cool.
it was objectively interesting. It was cool. It was creative. Uh, it was mostly the script that I did not care for, and Joel and Clementine I did not care for,
Yeah.
as well as Patrick, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and I, as I said, it really just had like so many like unseasoned hot takes that just really were a reflection of the people who wrote it, and that's fine. We maybe aren't friends, and that's fine. There's not a single character that didn't suck, and it's fine. And I think that's mostly just because of where I am on my own healing journey, and because I
Mhm.
can't watch things without analyzing them. But yeah, just so much of this film was toxic. It's very much a Gen X love story, which is not a love story that I would like to partake in. Uh, but yeah, they shouldn't be
Talk about
together.
hot take.
Uh, Most of the people who work there are predators and should be in jail.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah. One hundo.
And yeah, I don't know. I just feel like maybe, I don't know for sure. It just seemed like this movie gave a lot of people who like maybe would have had the logical take to be like, "Hey, we aren't right together. We want different things."
Mhm.
But would try again because they're like, "Well, love might be enough." And honestly, my hot take, the hill I will forever die on, is that there are reasons things happen and we should learn and listen from those things. And maybe that person who you don't get along with, do not have the same life goals, do not have the same aspirations, just do not
And
mesh
that's totally
with,
fine.
don't be with them, and that's okay because you experienced that, and now you can go find, now you know what you don't want. Listen to the part of your brain that says what you don't want and find something you do want.
Mhm.
Find something that makes you happy, because that's what I want for everybody. So yeah, I guess it's just more so that I just feel like it like reinforced things that don't help people grow, and that's fine. Is what it
Mhm.
is. But fun fact: breakups do actually mess with your brain in a pretty real way. I learned about that, and I also learned about that there's actual technology that could eventually be like fine tuned enough to make you forget things you don't want to remember. And I also found a fun article that said that if you forget things naturally, that just means you're smart,
That's
because your
nice.
brain decides what's important information and what's not. And if you're taking in a lot of important information, it'll you only have so much space in here. Your brain's only so big. So it'll throw things out that don't matter so that you have more space for the things that you deem to matter. So like where your keys or your phone are doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things when you're actively learning about, systemic oppression, Gabe.
Sure. I think my brain has its priorities all messed up. It
Yeah.
doesn't know what to keep.
But yeah, and it's also like object permanence and all this other stuff. It really, how you process information highly depends on how your brain operates and also how you process trauma. So it's a fun fact.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of Inside Out. Now they
Yeah.
have that scene where they're like, "Oh, we don't need these memories," and they're like deleting them. And I
And
was
some of
like,
them are core memories when they
"Yeah."
like fall down the street.
I was like, my that section of my brain has the most employees, and they are just constantly just like delete, 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 delete. We don't need that. We don't need that. We don't. What we are running out of space. We only have two shelves of,
Yeah.
of space we could keep. Everything is going in the trash.
Yeah. No, I mean, Gabe, you're preaching to the choir over here. I have an entire song blog of sad songs that every single one of them is, I can't remember people, and that makes me sad.
Yeah.
So I feel you. Um, but how do breakups impact your brain? That's what we're asking. I'm going to answer some of that for you. So, at the end of the day, trauma, as I said in many previous episodes, is highly subjective and entirely dependent upon the person experiencing something. A breakup can be traumatic to someone and is entirely dependent on who the people in the relationship are, how it ended, how invested both parties were, what were the, like, was it a sudden breakup? Was it over time? These kind of things. Were
Do
there
they have
signs?
children, you
Yeah, do
know?
they have children? Have they been married the majority of their life? There's like all the factors in their life really impact how it hits you afterwards. And if a relationship is toxic, abusive, or otherwise problematic, there's like an added factor that could make a separation both traumatic and life altering. It really kind of wraps around this whole thing where, like, when you are dating someone, depending on how long you are together, you're building a life with a person. You know, you
Mhm.
integrate them into so many parts of your life. You create foundations, supports, routines, all centered around another human being, or at least like influenced by. And the process of dismantling and losing these pieces can entirely disrupt your life, which is inherently traumatic.
Mhm.
This disruption can be exacerbated depending on the way your brain works, specifically like the traumas you've experienced already in your life, the other relationships you have around you, including your friends and family, as well as
Mhm.
like, do you have ADHD? Do you have autism? Are you neurotypical? Like, those things all kind of influence how our brain stores information and therefore how we process uh,
Mhm.
after events. And all these factors influence just how impactful a breakup can be. The loss of a partner through a breakup can be traumatic, and an article on The Insider titled, Breakups Can Impact You in More Ways Than You Think. Here's the science behind why they hurt so much by Sofia Mitrokostas. They say when you go through a breakup, especially one that's unexpected, your body may register it as an emergency and go into fight or flight mode. Being in this state triggers that release of hormones that can prepare your body to stay in that space and deal with a threat or run away to safety, according to Very Well Mind. It can also trigger rapid heartbeat, trembling, and other like physical responses.
Mhm.
Essentially, staying in a space of fight or flight is also a space that'll release toxic levels of cortisol. So, depending on how long you stay in that place,
Mhm.
can really impact your physical health. There's a lot of research around that specifically. We've talked about it before. I specifically remember our Turning Red episode where we talked about
Mhm.
like the adverse childhood experiences, as well as just like our ways that our brain will process cortisol and trauma, and how that can, if you stay in that space for too long, lead to long-term health impacts.
Mhm.
So if interested in more information about that specifically, you can check out that episode. But when it comes to a breakup specifically, the article quotes licensed clinical psychologist Dr. Kristen Bianchi, stating that research has shown that regions of the brain that get activated in response to physical pain also get activated in response to a breakup. Whether we've broken a bone or gotten dumped, many of the same underlying neurological structures are involved. This translates to the conscious experience of being in pain. So, like, when you're really sad and you're lying on the floor and you're like, my heart hurts while you're
Mhm.
crying, it does.
It does.
It
You're
does hurt.
valid.
Your brain is like literally sending pain to that area of your body.
Oh.
And the article goes on to describe the ways in which a breakup can alter our brain chemistry. It goes like that deep. And that when someone goes through a breakup, they experience a drop in the production of the neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin that are associated with the feelings of pleasure and happiness. So they literally alter your ability to create those chemicals that you need
Hmm.
to feel happiness again.
I'm sending a
Um,
hug to all the people going through a breakup right now. Just
Yeah.
so you know.
No, it's real legit. And it's like you're not irrational or crazy. Like, this is science that
Yeah.
supports the fact that this is actually deeply impactful. And it all kind of ties back to the fact that we don't view mental health on the same level as physical health with our society. There's not as much respect given to it. And that's like a problem because it's real.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
in another article from Big Think titled Using the Logic of Neuroscience to Heal from a Breakup by Jamie Bell, they go into detail on how our brains process love and process loss in a breakup. The feeling of being in love was known to light up the reward centers of our brain, releasing that dopamine, serotonin, and all those other feel good body chemicals that support positive things. And the loss of these feel good chemicals can experience a level of withdrawal similar to that of drug withdrawal and how it processed and like how it's processed in our brains. So they say
Mm,
when we are in love, our bodies are actively producing those feel good hormones and denying the release of negative hormones. And when the process suddenly stops, the withdrawal can feel extremely difficult to process, both from an emotional and physiological level. Along similar lines, the parts of the brain that process physical pain can also light up within the brains of those experiencing the emotional pain from a breakup. In an MRI images of people struggling with a recent heartbreak, the parts of the brain that lit up were some of the parts of the brain that are active when you experience physical pain.
mm,
Um, so the solutions for dealing with these emotional responses are easier said than done, in that they require a lot of like intentional deprogramming. You really have to be self-aware to make these like conscious efforts. You know what I mean? It's something that you're going to really have to like actively pursue. Uh, and sometimes when you're really sad or do not have the dopamine or serotonin, that's hard to get to. So it's one of those things that is easier said than done. Um, so it often includes avoiding those visual, auditory, and other sensory cues. So treating it like an addiction in a sense, avoiding the source,
mhm,
and avoiding things that will activate that like craving for that person. So sensory indicators are like something very common in triggering trauma. So things that smell like things that remind
mm,
you of them, things
mhm.
that look like them, auditory cues, music, songs. Don't listen to those songs, you know?
That's why it messed up Clementine when Patrick was reusing all the things that Joel did or said, because it
Yeah,
was
that's why they
reminding
said
her.
remove those things from your house because it's gonna mess you up.
Yeah. It was reminding her
Exactly.
something is wrong.
Exactly. And you don't have the context. So you're like in that space, but like panicking because you don't know why
Yeah.
you're feeling
Oof,
all of this, like,
that poor
you
baby.
know? So yeah, these doctors should all be fired and arrested in that
Mhm.
movie.
Yeah.
Very, very
Yes.
strongly. But yeah, so they activate the parts of our brain. Anything that activates the part of our brain that stores memory and these sensory areas can trigger these feelings. So you want to avoid those. It also says seeking out like alternative ways to release positive chemicals within your brain, like endorphins. So seek out physical activity, go to the gym, punch things, run around, do
Mhm.
things that release those endorphins, eat foods that release endorphins, stuff like that. That can also help the process of moving forward. And according to Dr. Winch, one of the biggest hurdles to recalibrating your brain and adapting to life without your ex partner is that we don't find closure. That's another piece of it. Winch suggests that we try to accept the reason for the breakup or even find a reason. Maybe the relationship would not have worked out because you wanted different things in life or because they were not emotionally available for you. Finding logic and heartbreak can be a good start in the healing process. So, another thing that's kind of easier said than done, but you can kind of create these things for yourself. That's kind of like why you have the tapes where you're like saying all the reasons you don't want to be with that person.
Yeah.
Uh, you
Trust
need that
yourself.
information because you need to logic your way out of it. Because breakups sometimes can feel very illogical, especially when you're dating someone who may struggle in communicating and self awareness, or if you struggle with that yourself. Sometimes logic doesn't exist in breakups, so you have to create it.
Mhm.
And it can be especially challenging when breakups happen suddenly or without any like real conversation or
Mhm.
logical cause that really stands out. So, searching for logic, creating it out of thin air, whatever you need to do, can be helpful in finding closure and not going back to that person. So, trying to identify causes and reasons essentially will help. And then the last little piece of my section that I found interesting is can people erase their memories? Apparently, like, yeah, like we're either there or we're close, you know? Um,
Uh,
so apparently the science for memory removal is there and or at least on its way. There are methods that are like ways of tricking your brain into forgetting things or just having a more positive connotation.
mhm.
And there are ways memory erasure could be used to support mental health and equally ways it could damage mental health as we kind of see in the movie. It's really one of those ethical questions that Jurassic Park, should we?
Mhm.
Because we
Not
can.
just yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I'm not a scientist that will create these things, so I don't know if I'm the one to speak on it. But it does seem we're kind of close to having the technology to do something somewhat similar to what was portrayed in Eternal Sunshine. In an article on SciTech Daily titled New Technique Can Help People Forget Certain Memories by the University of York, they go through where research currently stands on using sound specifically to suppress and enhance memory during sleep. So, similarly to how we saw Joel in the bed with the big helmet
Mhm.
while he's sleeping, there's ways that specifically if you're in your deepest part of sleep, which fun fact is a narcoleptic, I don't spend a lot of time in, so this procedure might not work on me anyway. But as a fun fact, when you're in the like deep sleep, so that part where you're like in your subconscious, essentially, that's where your brain is
Mhm.
processing the memories of the day that just happened, as well as like kind of all the little memories that live within your subconscious. There's a way that they've found to use sound and sound cues like through music and other things to kind of erase or like suppress rather I think is what they
Mhm.
were kind of doing those memories and the connotation surrounding them. So while they are currently in the experimental phase of this research, it seems their findings are promising in using cues and to alter memories through sound. In additional research, it seems there are a handful of ways to suppress memories, specifically in an article on frontiersin.org that is like a super sciencey title, but it seems like it's like an actual study. So, neural correlates of direct and indirect suppression of autobiographical memories by Saima Noreen, Akira O'Connor, and Malcolm MacLeod. They state research indicates that there are two possible mechanisms by which particular target memories can be intentionally forgotten. Direct suppression, which involves a suppression of the unwanted memory directly and is dependent on a fronto hippocampal modulatory process and memory substitution, which I've seen a few articles on now at this point, which includes directing one's attention to an alternate memory in order to prevent the unwanted memory from coming to mind. It involves engaging the caudal prefrontal cortex, and in the mid ventrolateral prefrontal cortex regions. So essentially, a lot of the other things that I was able to find that are more about like that memory substitution is like if you have the sensory cues, like their car, your
Mhm.
ex's car. You have a
Yeah.
very bad memory with this car because
Yeah.
it reminds you of your breakup. You see it, and all you can think of is the breakup with your ex.
Mhm.
What they basically say is to look at the car and try to force your brain to think about a positive memory, even if it has nothing to do with that specific person. Maybe that
Mhm.
car took you to the beach. So
Mhm.
you're remembering how nice it was to go to the beach. So instead of thinking of the breakup and having it like as a trigger, now you're having this like visual cue to remember what a great time you had at the beach. And it's kind of like deprogramming your brain into having a positive context for the things that you're seeing, hearing, and otherwise. Something they've also said in like going through a breakup is you want to have a more recent memory from those spaces. So kind of like alternately to what the previous advice was, is actually like revisiting places that you went with that person so that you have a new memory associated with it and kind of forcing your brain to associate that memory with that space. So instead of thinking of your ex, you think of your friend that you went to get coffee with at the coffee shop where you had the meet cute with the guy that you broke up with or girl that you broke with or whoever you're breaking up with, you know?
Mhm.
So you're kind of like tricking your brain into having these new thoughts. And that's something that works. There's also ways to do it sensory wise with smell. It all kind of ties back to sensory because that's most of the ways in which cues are sent to our brain to activate, in PTSD and other trigger based mental things. It's all very sensory oriented. So if you can trick your brain into having a new context for that sensory response, you're kind of like forcing your brain out of that fight or flight response.
Yeah.
Do those things work? The research does seem to indicate that there are ways in which it works. It really depends on the person, just like anything else. Um, but there is a lot of research indicating that we're closer to something similar to Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind. Maybe not exactly. I think from an ethical standpoint, there should be a lot of things in place, other methods. Like it should be in addition to therapy.
Mhm.
And there should be like a scale of what things you're trying to get rid of. you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know. It shouldn't be as easily accessible as like I found like one of the articles where it was like the whole premise of this film was that it's as easily accessible as Botox. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's
Yeah.
as easily as plastic surgery, and that's why like they kind of set it up in the movie to kind of look like rundown plastic surgeon's office.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing is like you're supposed to have this connotation that like the people going to this are looking for quick fixes,
Mhm.
and the
Mhm.
doctors doing it are doing it not to like help people.
Yeah.
That doctor was a predator, not a helping person.
Yeah.
Uh, they're not doing it to help people, they're doing it to get money at the end of the day. So you would want, in an ethical standpoint, you would hope that it would be done with actual wanting to help. It would be covered by insurance and
Mhm.
other things like that so that it doesn't become this money game where people are exploiting people who are in an emotional stress state for cash.
Something I was thinking about was there's like a song on TikTok that's going around everyone loves the if we ever broke up, I'd never be sad. You know that one?
No, but it
It's
sounds nice.
it's pretty fun, but I'm like whenever I hear it, I'm like, why are you with that person? If you're with someone that if you broke up, you're not sad. Like at my age, I'm like, that's a waste of time. Like,
Yeah.
I would be very, 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 very sad. Be
Yeah.
completely wrecked at this point in my life. So I was just like, no. And I'm also very sad. I'm a big sensitive baby. I'm always sad. Uh, so it is a very catchy. It's a fun song.
Yeah. Well, it's also like, what is your motivation behind a relationship? It's like those things are really important when you go into a relationship. So if someone's like
Mhm.
going into a relationship for fun, ideally they should be in a relationship with someone who's also going into a relationship for fun. So if they're going in a relationship not to be sad, then that other person in that relationship should have a clear conversation where they establish
Mhm.
we're going into this so that we're both not sad at the end, you know? It was a good time for both of us.
Yeah.
The problem is when the one
Communication.
person's like, "When we break up, I'm not gonna be sad," and then
Mhm.
the other person's like, "I wanted to marry you,"
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So communicate in your relationships. That'll help you a long way. And if
Mhm.
it seems like it's not gonna work out, like, that's fine.
Mhm.
Let it not work out. Communicate. Set boundaries
Yeah.
in the beginning.
Yeah, and it's like I think one of the worst conversations that they had when they're like breaking up is when she like mentions she wants children, and he like makes this snide remark about how she would not be a good mom, and like
Yeah,
I kind of agree because she definitely has a lot of things she has to work on, but it's like
first.
it's something that he clearly was holding and thought and is feeling, and also doesn't feel safe to say that to her. So it comes out in this way, and then she reacts in the way that she does because she's defensive for it. And it was just like that's something you've been holding. You know, like if you're
Yeah.
holding some dark stuff about your partner, you should go to therapy. You should talk this
Yeah.
out.
And also, it's like one of those things that doesn't have to be like a permanent state of being. He could have clearly said right now, and that would have had a different connotation
Than ever, like
than
because that's what
ever.
it is,
Yeah. Like you just accept that people never change or grow ever. Like that was the
Mhm.
theme of this movie.
Yeah.
No one ever grow. It's
Yeah.
fine. But yeah, that was like a horrible part of it that was super sad, where it was like,
Super heartbreaking.
because
And it
that's
just
clearly
like
one of her insecurities. Otherwise, she wouldn't have reacted that way.
mhm.
And he's like not communicating effectively or being honest about things either.
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
fun time.
I will say I will never defend the show The Mindy Project, and probably I'm only one of the only few people who's ever finished it. But there is one scene in particular at the end of her and Danny's relationship, spoilers for a show no one should watch, where he essentially just like unloads on her and he says all these things like, you're irresponsible, you're this, you're that, like just forever never seeing his own flaws, and she's just like, okay, yeah, I can admit that I got flaws. She's like, but I have always hoped that the person that I loved wouldn't just have a bag full of my negative pieces just ready at the ready to send at me, like
Mhm.
at the very, and that was like like the only good line of her show, and then they completely ruined it because she ends up with him at the end anyway.
Yeah.
And he never apologizes for that. I want that out there. trash show. Anyway,
Yeah.
but that one really hurt because I was just like, that is, it's so true. If you have all these things in your pocket that you could throw at your partner that are really insidious and horrible, that's time. It's time to evaluate. Do you even like that
Yeah,
person?
and
Who do
the
you
answer is
like?
no.
And
Yeah,
who do you like
because
instead?
yeah. Who you like is a version of them in your head that walks you through your childhood, and helps you through all your problems in your mind, that
Hmm.
doesn't actually exist in real life, and you shouldn't be with that person.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That scene really made me sad, and the scene where he talks about how he left when they first met because he thought she was like crazy. And she's like, well, is it something I said? And he's like, yeah, you said it like, then go. So like vehemently. And she's like,
mhm.
oh, I'm sorry. And when she said that, I don't know why, it made me really sad.
Yeah.
Like, cause it was not her fault. Like, she clearly was not in a good place. And she's like, then go. Like, you clearly think I'm a weirdo. Um,
Mhm.
and he did. And it's kinda crazy that he even went to be with her, but yeah, just, like, be like, "Oh, I'm sorry," because you don't know, because we don't talk about things.
Yeah, and I think that if anything, that's like a really clear indicator that like throughout the movie, at the very beginning was when they stopped talking
Mhm,
about how, like, because he was assuming her intention the
mhm,
entire time and vice versa. Like they never actually had like a why you say it like that kind of
mhm,
conversation, which would have really helped. If they had that actual interaction where it's like, oh, I wasn't trying to hurt you in that moment. You know, I wasn't
mhm.
trying to
Yeah,
say it with that kind of like anger. And then they can both sit down in this beautiful time and explore why she said it that way. And then they'll
yeah,
actually learn about each
and why he
other
took it that
and
way.
why he took it that way. And like maybe it ties back to the fact that his mom never hugged him as a child. And I'm sure it does. And there's just so much that they could have unpacked.
And they
But
can't
they
because they don't
didn't.
have those memories anymore. All
No.
they have is him saying, "She don't read books." You know, like, even in those tapes,
Mm,
he's not gonna he had that epiphany while it's being erased. So he didn't have that in the tapes. They don't
yeah.
know. They don't know that any of that. And no one else does. Only they would. So it's sad. It's a flawed
Yeah.
film, just like people are flawed. I think it is very beautiful. And I think it's that it's not flawed because it's not an answer. It's not supposed to
Yeah.
look like it's working. It's not supposed to look like this was the right thing to do. It's just a
Yeah.
human thing to do. And it's a human thing to happen and decisions to make because people are reckless like that. And we're here, and only as long as we're here, we make these decisions, you know?
Yeah.
Because everything feels so much bigger to us on this individual scale. So I think in that, it is a great film. It
It
is
does.
a
It shows a very real relationship.
great.
It's very realistic, very true to what humanity is. It didn't try to sugarcoat anything.
No.
It didn't try to romanticize it until the end. To
I
me, the end they did, but it's fine.
I think it still, like, left it up. Like,
Yeah.
we don't know. We don't know what they do. We don't know what happens to them next.
Yeah.
Um, we don't know if they ever, read listen to the rest of the tapes. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or
I
what
hope they
happens to the
grow.
rest of people. Yeah, I hope
Yeah.
they go too. I hope if you are going through a breakup and you watch this film that it teaches you not to erase those things. I think watching it in a breakup would probably be a really different emotion.
Mhm.
I think it the Manic Pixie Dream Girl element is really great. It's refreshing to see someone flawed, and not and like for him to be like, "You right, you can't fix me. I'm messed up."
You can
Uh,
only fix you, and that's
and
okay.
that's all I should ever ask of you.
Mhm.
And yeah, now I'm thinking about it. I think it's a good movie, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this series,
Yeah, this was
Untainted
fun.
Love.
It's been
So.
interesting.
Mhm. Next week, we'll be talking about season 3 of You, and I can't wait to talk about Joe. And Love. I get to play Love,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
I'm always playing her.
And they don't talk about things in a different way, you know, because they talk about a lot of things, but it's in a very different way that the things that they don't talk about. They're very action based. They're
Yeah.
impulsive in a different kind of way.
I can't wait to talk about them. They're my
It's gonna
favorite.
be fun.
Season 3 is my favorite. It's so
Yeah.
fun. I can't wait.
I'm only on episode 1, so by the time we get to that episode, I'm very excited to see how far I get into the
Yeah,
have opinions about it.
it's gonna be fun. So I look
Mm,
forward to it. We're also gonna be talking about friendship, relationships as well, and just like people impact other people all the time. We mean a lot to each other, even if you don't want to
yeah,
admit it. We're not like humans are just made to be social, Happiness only real when shared. Chris
yeah.
McCandless, RIP. Uh,
Being a
so,
person is hard, and when you
yeah.
don't under if you're neurospicy and you don't understand other people
Hmm.
all the time, that can be really hard too.
Yeah.
Good luck out there. Dating's hard. As what's the song? It's the season, the dating season. The
Uh,
SNL skit,
oh, it's
"It's cuffing
yeah, it's
season."
cuffing season.
Yeah, so if you're
You're a big
dating,
boy.
yeah,
Yeah. It's like when you get a puppy for Christmas, because you're like or like a Valentine's Day, and it's like, those are a commitment,
yeah,
okay? It's a big deal. Same thing with person, okay?
yeah, you
Don't just
gotta
it's
go
just because
into
it's
it.
cuffing season, don't just grab big boy.
Yeah,
You
treat
should
the big
want the
boy
boy boy.
nice, and yeah, you wanna, know like, their heart too, and their
Yeah.
minds. You wanna like all of it, and you need to communicate.
Yeah.
Everyone in your cuffing season, be honest about what you want out of the time.
Yeah.
Don't be
Yes.
breaking hearts.
Well, don't get married.
Delete your kids
Don't let your kids or you they didn't want kids and you did, and you should have definitely talked about that before you got married.
before they did that, yeah.
Big old conversation.